just one person.
In a world where film, television, video games, technology, toys, lawnmowers, dark matter.
Wait a minute. Lawnmowers, dark matter?
Sorry. Where most of those things meet, one podcast stands alone, going behind the scenes.
Hold on to your butts.
I love it when a plan comes together.
You're listening to the Mediajuice Podcast.
Hello, gamers, cinephiles, TV file. What do you call a TV file? Is that a word?
That's a couch potato.
Oh, okay. Maybe we're alienating our audience there, but either way, I'm a couch potato. They talk about like there's couch potato mode, like when you're playing a game, and then there's, when you're watching a movie or television show, and then there's interactive mode, and that you can't cross the two.
Right.
But I think it's like now with VR, the whole couch potato and interactive. Those lines are blending a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, probably. That seems fair.
Yeah, I mean, for half the reason being in VR, most of the VR games you got to stand up, so you can't be a couch potato.
Right. Which is somewhat. Some would say that's counterintuitive of a video game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the topic of film, television, and video games. And couch potatoes. Really cool episode today. I got to talk to my friend Lewis Castle, who's now the head of Amazon Game Studios. But we don't really talk about anything related to Amazon Game Studios because that's all still under wraps, and they've got, I'm sure, some grand plan of some matrix that they're going to unleash. It's in true Amazon style. So we don't really know what the plans for Amazon Game Studios are. I'm sure there's been several press releases of things that you could look up, but our conversation focuses more on his history from Westwood Studios to Command and Conquer to all that cool stuff. So I think I had fun with the interview. What about you, Jeremiah?
Oh yeah. Good stuff. Just a guy that's been influential in the video gaming industry. And we talked a little bit of tabletop gaming too, which is definitely my wheelhouse as well. So just
up your alley.
Overall great interview.
Yeah. And it's fun too that you forget, it's like you're like me, you have geeky conversations with people about games and movies and tabletop. And, for the most part, people kind of have the same opinions or like maybe one of 5 different opinions, sort of multiple choice. But then you forget when you're talking to someone like Lewis, like this guy, there's a reason that he is where he's at because he kind of he gives these answers that make you think, and if you're interested in what's happening in technology, I think you'll be interested in this little chat we have.
Definitely. And beyond that, we have our regular segments in this show. So look for us to go behind the curtain, and you're going to share some news about Marvel versus Capcom, the infinite battle for the stones.
Yeah, it's kind of a tongue twister. It's Marvel versus Capcom Infinite, which is the next in the iteration of Marvel versus Capcom. And then they have a new sort of esports tournament series called Battle for the Stones, which ties in with the Infinity Stones. And it's pretty cool. Right. Yeah, we'll talk about all that. Yeah,
looking forward to that. And as well, we're going to talk about PAX West. You were out there. That's going to be our cutscene segment for the episode. You were out there doing some shooting out there. So interested to hear what you were up to in it's Seattle, right? It's in Washington?
Yeah, in Seattle.
Yeah.
And I indeed will tell you what I was up to during the cutscene segment. Oh.
Good.
Or is that behind the curtain?
No, that's cutscenes.
Or is that cut the curtain or behind the scene?
Or is that cut the rug? That's something totally different.
That's different. That's a different podcast. Okay. All right, let's roll it.
What was it like to become an overnight success? And says, well, I worked 25 years to be an overnight success.
Yeah, it's not a good habit to get into.
So they have a lot of experience in, basically BS. We should probably have like a sound effect when I do spoiler.
Right? Just I'll sound the alarm.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Green Room. And this week I've got my friend Lewis Castle, who, as you may or may not know, depending on what level of gamer you are, Lewis is probably most well known for the Command and Conquer series, the RTS genre. Lewis and I met, what's it been, Lewis, 4 or 5 years ago at the Classic Gaming Expo. Was that right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So I had reached out to Lewis early days when I was planning Video Games the Movie. And I forget, Lewis, I forget who referred me to you. I feel like when I dipped my toe into sort of the veterans, the icons of the industry, it was sort of this snowball of like, oh, yeah, I know Al Alcorn, or I know Nolan Bushnell, or, oh, you should talk to David Crane. Oh, you need to talk to Lewis Castle. And it was like one thing fed another. You were in there somewhere.
Yeah, I couldn't say actually. Lots of folks I do know. So it's something about hanging around long enough in the industry, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to start with that. Can you tell people? Well, I'll say this first. So there's all types of genres in games, of course, shooting games, FPSs, driving games, strategy games, action games. Can you sort of give a high level definition to the uninitiated of what an RTS game is and the history of that and how you fit into that? I know that's a huge, far-ranging question, but
just do it in like 90 seconds.
It's not so hard. Real-time strategy games are remarkably well described by the title of their genre, in that in the history of video games, there was a rich history of automating or making digital versions of strategy games that many people might be familiar with, very, very complex ones like maybe even Axis and Allies and such, and these war games that would have miniatures and such. And they, in the early days of games, let's say in the 80s, and maybe even as late as the early 90s, it was thought of that strategy games, because they took so much time to consider all the pieces on the board and what they all might do and make all your moves, that they had to be turn-based. One person takes a turn, then another person takes a turn. There's some sort of results that are determined, and then you move on to the next phase. And that's sort of the way it had been done for many, many years. Myself and Brett over at Westwood had already been bringing real-time aspects to other types of games, like role-playing games with Eye of the Beholder and such, where we had the D&D rules, which were very much turn-based, and we had made them into a real-time game with Eye of the Beholder. And so the natural fit was, why don't we take these really complex games that we've been doing for many, many years and make them a real-time game where the difficulty wasn't just that you had to make good strategic choices, but you had to do so very rapidly and with limited amount of information about the battle. And so that's really the beginning of the real-time strategy genre. And it was inspired by a couple of different games. There was one called Military Mad, which was a turn-based military game. Mm-hmm. Another one called Rescue Raiders, which was a real-time flight and rock, paper, scissors kind of tower defense game, the predecessor to tower defense. And so Joe Bostic and Brett were actually the chief designers, Joe from the systems point of view, Brett from sort of the fiction and such, to say, hey, why don't we bring one of these games into the real-time space and make a strategy game that happens in real time. And at the time, we were very close to Virgin Interactive Entertainment, mm-hmm. and they had a franchise with Dune. And so they came to us and said, hey, would you like to do a game based on Dune? And it was just the right time for us to take the real-time strategy aspects of the thought process and put them into the very first, what looks like real-time strategy now. And the reason I say that is there were certainly other games that preceded Dune 2 that would qualify as being a strategic game that was in real time. But the formula that has become so pervasive in all of the real-time strategy games out there, like all the Command & Conquers, the Warcrafts, the Starcrafts, Age of Empires, and there's just series after series after series of billion-dollar franchises, all built on this sort of formula of a top-down map where you're building a set of building a set of buildings that have resources that allow you to create forces to defend or attack, and those kinds of games. And as a real-time strategy, Dune 2 is certainly the very first one that kind of met all those criteria. And then weirdly, to bring it into modern day, if anybody's heard of League of Legends or any of the other MOBAs,
Sure.
it was actually a mod of StarCraft that created the very first MOBAs. And so all of those games owe their history to real-time strategy. They're basically just smaller or more isolated versions of real-time strategy games.
Yeah, and that's I didn't know that until we started to dig into League of Legends for the esports episodes that we shot for Unlocked. Digging into what MOBAs are, which for the uninitiated, it's is it multiplayer online battle arena?
Yeah, that's it.
Is that right? Okay. That those did have their roots from. I think League sort of came off of Dota 2, kind of built League of Legends off of Dota 2, which I never knew until I started researching. And now even you talk about like modern games, a lot of the mobile, which I know is a term that's being used less and less now in games because the platforms are becoming ubiquitous, or I guess that's the goal. But a lot of quote unquote mobile games now, that seems to be the heavy play is top down RTS type stuff. Am I on track there? Or?
Yeah, that's definitely an influence. We'll stick with the comments you made on the MOBAs first. Certainly, the MOBAs owe their history to the StarCraft games, which are similar. Certainly inspired by the Command and Conquer, which were inspired by the StarCrafts. It's kind of this great mix of things back and forth, and they really are very. When people say, "Oh, they were inspired by or derived from," literally the very first MOBAs were just narrow-focused real-time strategy games, and the whole category of esports, almost. I don't know what percentage, but it'd be certainly much more than half of all esports are either RTS games like StarCraft or a derivative from RTS games like MOBA. So it wouldn't be hyperbole to say that that esports owes their history to real-time strategy games, which owes all of it back to Dune 2. So it was really a very pivotal game in the games industry history, and very happy to be a part of that one and the follow-up, which was the Command and Conquer series. When you talk about mobile RTS, they're using the term because real-time strategy, of course, is very descriptive. They've used that quite liberally in the mobile games. There were a bunch of guys that did desktop tower defense as part of the Kixeye group now, and that desktop tower defense is really more. Tower defense is not really a real-time strategy game, although it does have real-time aspects and it is strategy. It's not the same kind of pieces that you would have described it as. Like you would have never confused that game with Command and Conquer or StarCraft. And mobile has used real-time strategy aspects in a way that's sort of a blend between tower defense and real-time strategy. So when somebody says real-time strategy MMO, they usually mean a blend of real-time strategy and tower defense. And frankly, as you mentioned earlier, these are all getting TLA, three-letter acronyms. They just start to get very confusing after a while. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what are people doing. And what the player is doing is they're being forced to make both micro decisions or micro movements, which in the case of MOBAs, there's a lot of them, so it's very twitchy, and macro decisions, which in the case of real-time strategy games are really where you win the game. So these long strategic decisions that may run over many tens of minutes or even hours in some cases if you go way back far enough. It was not uncommon for real-time strategy matches to last over an hour or two. So very, very different from today where the mobile side, you want them to resolve very quickly. So different kinds of games, but they're all touching on some very similar aspects, which is this idea that I have to make decisions quickly because that's going to create my tactical success, but there's also a strategy or a meta game that I have to pay attention to at the same time.
That's interesting. Where my mind goes as you're talking about that is two parts to this question. One, what were the influences of tabletop gaming for you and for the guys at Westwood, if any? And do you think that the current resurgence in tabletop has anything to do with where video games are now?
Well, I have comments on those. I don't know that I'm authority on both of them, but from a personal point of view, And we played a lot of tabletop games. We liked miniatures. It just takes a long time to set up a miniature game. So the guys at SSI used to have a part of their building where they had these big boards set up for reenacting the battles from the Civil War and such. And so to say we were influenced by table games would certainly not be inaccurate. I mean, a lot of us played a lot of table games. Certainly Dungeons and Dragons and other games like that inspired us as young game makers, and we love the sophistication of those games. So I can say for absolutely that most of Westwood were very much into tabletop games of their time, and to some extent miniatures. The resurgence of board games really has something more to do with the fact that I would probably put it back to maybe Settlers of Catan, at least the first game that I'm aware of, that had a victory condition for a board game that required you to play it all the way to the end to determine who won. And so the difference up until then was, from a game design point of view, most board games, if somebody got to the point where they were winning by knocking other people out of the game, something like Monopoly, or a game where you got so far ahead that it was almost impossible to imagine somebody catching up to you. And so there was a point in time in the evolution of the gameplay session where most of the members of the games, or certainly some members who were playing the games, just really didn't have much to do but to watch other people play. And I think that that's always been holding back tabletop gaming. And that's why the games like Dungeons and Dragons and others, which were really in your imagination, everybody stays engaged and keeps playing. And I think that Settlers was certainly the first experience I'd had with a table game, that board game, tabletop game, where it changed the way you thought about, like I could employ a different strategy than somebody and still win doing something completely different than they were doing. And that I think that just caused an opening up of thought process around what could be a good board game. And now I play board games almost every Saturday with my friends, and I'm stunned and delighted by the variety of games. And I think what's really surprised me over the last probably 5+ years is the wide variety of collaborative and cooperative games where you're playing against the game itself, as well as the asymmetric play where one of my love is Letters from Whitechapel, where one person plays Jack the Ripper and the others play the cops. I mean, those kinds of games are just really delightful and just surprisingly good and exciting games to play.
Yeah, Letters from Whitechapel is fantastic. It's funny because I was just at Gen Con a couple weeks ago myself, and a lot of what I hear about tabletop gaming, you're right. You know, the co-op aspect has grown exponentially over the last few years, and a lot of people are kind of turning back to tabletop gaming because of the social aspect. Which is, it's interesting to me because, I mean, both industries obviously are thriving, tabletop gaming, video gaming, mobile gaming. But it almost seems to me like mobile gaming and console gaming is growing even more because of the connectivity that barrier's kind of been breached. The technology's there, the infrastructure's there that people can game together. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that's part of what's going on with video games and tabletop gaming, or is there something else at play?
Yeah. I want to wait till you finish, but I absolutely think that's exactly right. What's so amazing is, when I started in computer games, you start because you get socialized, especially back then. You find out that there's a way to play them. And all the games that allowed people to play together always had sort of a better stickiness factor. And you would get people to get together to play Bomberman or something like that. And then when online games allowed people to play together and have game sessions where they would meet with strangers or even their friends and have game dates, it just changes the way you think about them because it starts to bring people together. Well, board gaming went through that same kind of revolution where suddenly it was more about having the social contact and the context of being together. It just became something to do. And we have people who play board games that had never thought of themselves as gamers before. They don't even play video games, but they like the social aspect of sitting around and maybe having a tiki cocktail and chatting. These are all adults, and these are not kids, So it's not about a bunch of kids playing life. And the funny part is you talk to some folks, especially older folks, and you go, we're playing board games. They're like, what, do you play like, play like Monopoly and Life? It's like, yeah, no, not like that. No, we play Jack the Ripper and Call of Cthulhu and Pandemic, actually, where the world gets poisoned and dies. So very, very different heady themes and, just a very, very different kind of experience. But the social aspect is what's so incredibly important. And I think we're on the brink of another really big wave of change in the way that games are made as well. The Kickstarters for board games, as well as the kinds of Kickstarters for video games, and now being able to interact directly through broadcasters with audiences on Twitch, and even having a much more active community connection where you have the ultimate consumers of your product are helping to inform how that product gets made, is a very, very exciting place to be. And I think it's going to dramatically, it already has and will continue to change the way that games are made and the way that they're marketed and discovered. And I think it's probably the social aspect of all of this is the thing that can't be underestimated. Even when I took a brief detour out of the video games industry to go into the casino gaming industry, I was a strategy officer for a casino supply company. And the games that we made were games where the other players couldn't affect your outcomes, so they were very accessible for social play. You're playing against the house collaboratively against the house, and so you could all win when the house loses. And that just changes the way you approach a game, because you don't have to. You can suddenly feel good about the people you're playing with. It's not a game like poker or 21 where other people's, although in 21 technically it doesn't affect you, it does feel bad when somebody quote takes your card. In the case of poker, obviously it's directly head to head.
Sure.
So we're finding that collaborative play is just much more social, and collaborative play is just much more compelling than competitive play for a wider audience. At the same time, competitive play couldn't be expanding more than it is now, because the world is just becoming so much more vast. So you can always find somebody to play against. And so I think that both have a long and rich future, and that in both cases you're going to be seeing more and more involvement of the fans.
I think of the original Mario Brothers, not Super Mario, but Mario Brothers arcade, which a lot of people helm as the first sort of collaborative or cooperative video game. You could either help, Mario can help Luigi and you can work together to kill all the turtles and crabs, or you could, advertently or inadvertently, bounce a crab onto your, Mario or Luigi and kill him and win. So it could be, versus, or it could be cooperative. And, doing a lot of research over the last few years working in the documentary space, discovering that when people played that, sort of had this aha moment of like, it was up to that point always just a single, a space game, you against the aliens, or against the villain, whatever. But this idea of cooperation, that now it's come full circle to what we're talking about with tabletop. And this is, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I'll hopefully bring it back home. I love, Jeremiah knows this, I love the series Stranger Things, like millions of other people do. And I think it's ironic that season 1 starts with them playing a tabletop game. They're basically playing D&D against the Demogorgon. And then season 2, I don't know what season 2 starts with because it hasn't come out yet, but the trailer for season 2 starts with a video game, starts with Dragon's Lair. And it's like, as a game historian, I just completely geek out about both of those things. And seeing, I look at you and the history with the RTS and Westwood, and now you've come, some people would say full circle to Amazon. How all of this rich history of gaming and tabletop is now, it's gone through these waves of being nostalgic, but out of fashion, in fashion. But now, what you're doing there at Amazon, I don't know how much you can or can't talk about all of that history and experience, and the nostalgia of it too. It has come to this point of you're there at the 800 or 8,000 pound gorilla. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I'm very curious to hear what you're working on at Amazon, if you can talk about it.
That the point of the nostalgic podcast and stuff is that PR departments and everything say, oh, okay, fine, you can go off the rails. We don't really care what you talk about. Just try to stay away from our current releases so that we have a decent chance of controlling the messaging.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
so I can't speak too much about it, other than the thing that attracted me to Amazon. It still attracts me here, and what makes me excited is the ability to bring, to build and foster large communities of players that can help us make amazing game experiences using technologies that are, frankly, they're just ridiculous amounts of computational power that are available now that just never were. So that the kind of combination of large audiences and computational power that just is it really is truly staggering. The option, the sort of space that you can invent in, the space you can invent things from is massive. And so that's what's exciting about it. And the products that were just very early days in the very early incubation, we're really not ready to talk about. But it's exciting, and I'm really enjoying my time.
And how does it feel for you to, to bring all that to bear? I mean, looking back at what, I don't know, Command and Conquer sold what, a million, 10 million units? I mean, looking back at...
Oh, yeah,
at
a few more. Yeah, the original
more.
Command and Conquer sold a couple million, and then Tiberian Sun kind of pushed close to 4, I think, and Red Alert was somewhere in between. So they always kept racking each other up a little bit. All set in, it's, well over 100 million copies, I think, of all the different Command and Conquer variants and platforms and everything. It's just a staggeringly large number.
Wow.
And as a single game, the one that we sold at Westwood that was the biggest, I think, was Lion King, about 4.7 million copies across the SNES and Genesis. So it's probably the biggest game we had under the Westwood label as far as a single product multi-SKU. And nowadays, I mean, if I wasn't going out to have many millions of people play my game, I think I'd consider it a failure. Then you go on to something like Zynga, where the smaller games had 3-4 million people playing every day. It's pretty amazing. So the world's changed, and the thing I've found over the time is that audiences are very predictable in small numbers. If you're making a game for a single player or 1 to 4 players, you can have a high degree of predictability about what people are going to do. And they're very predictable at large numbers. Once you have hundreds of thousands or millions of people playing, on balance, people will tend to do things very similarly. It's the stuff in between that gets really, really there's a high beta, and it's hard to predict. And so it's a really interesting thing looking back on my career and all the things I've done and saying, wow, all that experience helps to inform, I hope, reasonably good early guesses or instincts, if you will. And then you have to have humility, and you have to have a willingness to learn, an eagerness to learn, because it's constantly changing. The space is just constantly changing. And so if you start to fall back on I'm going to make a game like I did 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, sure, you can do that. And then some of the nostalgic games do great, and they're tons of fun to play because they tap on that nostalgic vein.
Yeah, that we were just talking to Randy Pitchford about that exact topic. Just, me as a filmmaker, it's sort of like once I got a handle on the gear and lensing and cameras and stuff, I felt like, okay, I know the basics. Of course, there's going to be new cameras that come out and new lenses, and I can always dabble in that. But now that I've quote unquote figured that out, now I can pay attention to my craft, to the story, to the fun part. Not that I don't think cameras and lenses are fun, but Randy basically made your same point there. Just said, in gaming, we have to sort of reinvent our camera every time. If you're going to be competitive,
yes.
Which is just,
I think
crazy. so many people don't realize that like the art and science and gaming is just unprecedented.
Yeah. And it's also why it's, people, that's why there's always room for new talent in the industry. There's always room for new ideas, because you may not be the very first one to do this type of product, but you might be the first one to do it in VR, or the first one to do it in AR, or the first one to do it in, in the cloud. And so every time there's a seat change in the technology base, you have new opportunities for old concepts, old core concepts to be reimagined in a way that make them truly unique and inventive again. So I think we're going to be chasing the technology meets art dragon for a long time.
I think you're right.
So, and every so many years, I hear about somebody talk to me about, at some point in the near future, we're going to have a platform that's so powerful we won't have to worry about the technology. We just get to create entertainment. I'm like, well, I'm still doing this since 1982, and I got to tell you, it's the end is no closer in sight than it ever has been, and I'm not sure it ever will be. So.
Well, it's the old like, if you've got 4 gigs to use, then you're going to use 4 gigs. If you've got 50 gigs, then you'll use 50 gigs. It's just sort of the chicken and egg thing.
Yeah.
I'm very much obviously old school. I mean, I'm old school and new school. I've got all the new consoles, and obviously, as a filmmaker, you've got to stay in tune with technology, which I try my best to. But I always have this idea of, this sort of the world without us, or the Last of Us kind of, if someday the network, goes down, I want to have a physical copy, of movies and my games that I can play here in my little house with my generator. But I don't know how many people share that idea. So Lewis, I know you've got a time frame here. So last question, which I'm sure you get this all the time, is what's your advice to, aspiring artists, creators, filmmakers, game designers, somebody who's out there saying, I'm looking at, icons like Lewis Castle and everything that he's done, and they don't know where to start. What's your advice to aspiring artists out there?
Yeah, just start. So a friend of mine who's a writer, once said to me, he said, I'm a writer because I have to write. Every day I get up and I write, and I put down ideas on Post-it notes, and then I write because I'm interested in the things, and then I write. And it's just what I do. It's who I am. And so if you want to be a game maker, make games. There's never been a time where it's been easier to make reasonably high quality products, even on your own. But there's other people that are like-minded, so go find them and work with them and make games. The more things that you actually build and complete, the better you get at your craft. It stands true for designers, writers, artists, programmers, all of it. Every piece of this comes down to having intellectual curiosity, always being wanting to learn and being hungry to do new things. And that's basically the only way to really do it. Just do it, do it, do it, do it. If you can afford to, obviously putting them out in the beginning as free and not having to worry about how to make money on it all is a whole lot easier. And that's where most people need to start as hobbyists, is just get your craft in order. And then eventually you'll find somebody that will pay you for something that's related to what you do. Maybe it's not exactly games, but it's something similar. And ultimately someday you get to where somebody's paying you to actually work on games, and maybe even your own games. But I don't think that a great designer is a great designer because they decided, okay, I'm going to go take the right classes in college, get out of school, get a job as a designer, and it's all, clap my hands, I'm all done. You're a great designer because you think about design. You think about the design of all things, everything. And games, in addition to games, but games are certainly if you're focused on that. And you keep writing up new designs. You keep imagining ways that things could be better. You're critical about the way things have been made so that you understand where compromises were made and how they worked, how they didn't. Not at the naive level of, oh, I just want the game that's the best of this and the best of this and the best of this. But, oh, actually, to be the best at this, they had to make some compromises. Even if there wasn't a technology compromise, it was probably a focus or design compromise. And starting to analyze how things are made and what makes them great. Those are the things I give as advice. Just go do it and do it again and again and again. Don't be disappointed that the first ones don't work out. Most people have many, many failures before they have successes.
Yeah, and that's, if I've seen a common thread in successful artists, whether it be game designers or filmmakers or whatever, it's you can't wait for the ideal set of circumstances. You got to just start, and I couldn't agree more. Just get your hands dirty, get the experience.
The other one that I liked, which a little quip, was, and I don't remember who said it, was one of the awards ceremonies that I was at, and they said they were asked, what was it like to become an overnight success? And said, well, I worked 25 years to be an overnight success.
That's right. So true.
It's exactly how it works, right? So it's true of most industries. There are very few true overnight successes.
Well, Lewis, we appreciate your time and appreciate everything you've done in your career. We've all benefited through the entertainment you've put out there. And please come back when you can talk more about what you're doing at Amazon, because I'm sure it's going to be awesome, and our listeners would love to, and myself, I'd love to just geek out and talk more about Westwood and then connect those dots to Amazon.
Well, I'm always available for the nostalgic stuff anytime you'd like. So if you have something from the career that fits into your programming, give me a call. I'll be happy to do it. For the new stuff, though, obviously I need to work with my marketing partners and PR partners, but I'm happy to give you a ring again when we're ready to talk about them. We have some really exciting stuff coming, and so I'm sure there'll be a point in time where I can gush poetically about what the wonderful things our teams are doing here. So.
Yes,
Excellent.
we're waiting for the poetic gushing. All right. Well, thank you, Lewis. We appreciate your time, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We are tonight's entertainment.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You can't handle the truth.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
All right, it's time to take a look behind the curtain. We are going to pay attention to the man behind the curtain because that is Jeremy Sneed. So tell us all about this Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the Battle for the Stones tournament thing that's going on. What did you have to do with all of that?
Yeah, it's like I said in the intro, it's kind of a tongue twister. Half the people I know that aren't gamers say Capcom instead of Capcom, which I used to all the time too. It's kind of like when you were kids. My little sister, she didn't say Nintendo, she said Intendo.
Yes.
And I think half the time when I saw Capcom's logo as a kid, I was like, Capcom? Wait, what is it? Yeah, so it's Capcom's Marvel versus. See, now I'm doing it.
Gotcha.
Capcom's Marvel versus Capcom Infinite Battle for the Stones, which is a mouthful. So just to give the full context on that, as you may, people that listen to the podcast or know my work or the work of Mediajuice know that we've been working with Capcom it's been coming up on 15 years. So since 2005, we've done the Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5 official trailers, teasers, Capcom Pro Tour, Devil May Cry, on and on and on. We've done tons of stuff for Capcom, love them as a client, and we worked on the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite launch trailer for E3, the E3 specific trailer that they showed at the PlayStation event, which was a lot of fun. We did the trailer and sort of this back wall. You kind of had to be at the event to see it, but imagine like a smaller screen for the audience in front of a huge kind of 8K theatrical screen.
Oh, wow.
And we did sort of some interactive elements like Infinity Stones and space on the back screen, and then the trailer on the front screen. So that was fun, and we thought that was it. We're like, oh, that's cool. We did that. We did the MVCI trailer for E3, but Capcom came back to us and said, hey, we're planning this sort of, you might call it like an exhibition series. It's not officially, I don't think it's part of the Capcom Pro Tour, sort of their normal set of premiere events where they've got players competing and it's all going towards the Capcom Cup, which is kind of their Super Bowl of Street Fighter, Capcom esports. It's kind of an exhibition one-off series specifically to do with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which as a game focuses specifically on the Infinity Stones, Infinity War, Infinity Gauntlet, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Thanos is spoiler alert here. We should probably have like a sound effect when I do spoiler.
Right. Just I'll sound the alarm. I'll take care of that in post.
Okay, great. It's all the Capcom roster, Street Fighter and Ghosts and Goblins and Devil May Cry and on, and then the Marvel roster, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Hulk, etc. And they've come together. So Ultron from the Marvel universe and Sigma, who is from the Mega Man universe, have merged to become Ultron Sigma. And his whole thing is he wants to, kind of like Ultron did in the film, I think it was Civil War, or no, it's Avengers: Age of Ultron. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
He wanted to kind of do away with all biological life, and that's part of this. In the game, they want to do away with biological life, make everybody into machines, and so of course the Marvel and Capcom characters come together to try to defeat Ultron Sigma, but in doing so, they come across Thanos and they need the help of the Infinity Stones to do that. And all of that to say, it's a very rich storyline that's very appealing to geeky gamer types like me and everybody at Mediajuice and you, Jeremiah. So Capcom sent us this. We had several phone calls, and then they sent us this kind of epic PowerPoint presentation of like, okay, here is this esports exhibition series that there's like 6 events, and at these 6 different events, which I think the first one just happened last weekend. At each event, you can fight or battle for one of the Infinity Stones, and whoever wins an Infinity Stone, not only are you in the finals, that Infinity Stone will give you the ability to change like major rules of the game.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I don't know all the details of it. These are very broad strokes. But basically, yeah, they sent us this PowerPoint of like, okay, here's all the competitions, and online players can qualify this way, and Evo champions are going to come in at this level, and previous Marvel vs. Capcom 3 players are going to come in at this way. And just like we looked at this thing, we were like, oh my gosh, it's very heady. It's like if you didn't play sports and you had to like go in and look at like the NCAA championships and figure out like the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed, all the
right.
I have no idea. It's kind of like that. And they gave us this PowerPoint, and after a couple of phone calls, it was basically like, okay, now we need an epic trailer that basically turn that PowerPoint into a trailer. Which honestly, that's what it boils down to with every client. It's you're gonna get a creative brief. You might have a series of phone calls, but our job as an agency is to take that information, take the branding, and make it exciting. Turn it into a message that is going to get people to respond. So we kind of went on this. I mean, it was very short turnaround, just by the nature of secrecy with the game, and with it launching at the same time as some things that are going on with Capcom Pro Tour. They couldn't really greenlight the trailer until the 11th hour, and so me and my team, I mean, we spent a good 5 days, just 18-hour days overtime, working on graphics and gameplay footage, and we cast a really awesome voice actor. His name's Chris Ryan. He's done a lot of stuff for HBO, and we sent him the script and had some remote sessions with him, got his VO back, and put it all together. It really came together better than I thought it would for a limited amount of time. You know how it is when the client comes and they're like, okay, here's what we need, here's when we need it. You already start making those compromises as a creator in your head, of like,
right.
What can we do? What can't we do? Which we all did the same thing here at Mediajuice. Me and Kenny and Eric and Patrick and Ashley and Shelby and Jeff were all kind of different people were working on different pieces, and it happened to all just come together, and it looks really polished, because it is. We spent, even though it was a very condensed amount of time, we put a lot of time and effort into it.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was on Instagram. You guys put some cuts up of this of some of the videos you guys were working on, and looked really, really hot. Looked really good. So good work.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, we try to put everything up on the Mediajuice Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So yeah, check it out. Like I said, the hub of all things Mediajuice, of course, is the website. If you can't remember anything else, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, a lot of late nights, but you can do that ever so often when a client needs it, just not all day, every day.
Yeah, it's not a good habit to get into. All right, well, it's time for cutscenes, and PAX West. I'm pretty jealous. I've never been to a PAX con before, so I'd love to make it out to one sometime soon. We'll see. PAX Unplugged is actually coming up in November.
Oh, cool. I feel like there's a new PAX like every time I turn around. It's PAX East, PAX West, PAX South, PAX Unplugged, PAX Moon.
Yeah, there's lots of PAX. They must be doing something right.
Yeah. Well, I've always had, I mean, definitely, I want to talk about PAX West. I have this love-hate relationship with conventions. Because on the one hand, I love film, television, games. I'm a geek. I'm a collector. So going to these conventions as a collector, as a fan, I love it. But for the past decade plus, I've also gone to these conventions, to work, to shoot, to film interviews, to film documentaries, which, is I think like psychologically my brain goes to, even though it's my filmmaking career, my brain goes to, when I hear convention, I think, oh, work, sweat, long hours.
Right. There's
not
a Pavlovian response to,
but I still override it. I'm like, oh, it's going to be fun. We're going to, which the PAX West was a good example of. So 2K Games, who, of course, any gamer knows who that is, 2K Sports, BioShock, you name it, they've done it.
Right.
They're probably one of the top 5 biggest publishers out there. They publish, Borderlands for Gearbox. They had us go out to work on some stuff, confidential stuff. Some of which I can talk about since a couple of the videos have come out. So one of the events that they had was for BioShock. So BioShock has turned 10 years old this year.
Oh,
so
wow.
Isn't that crazy to think about? It was 10 years ago.
It's ridiculous.
When I heard that, I was like, no, it hadn't been 10 years. Wait a minute, 2006? Oh, yeah, it did. It came out in 2007.
Yeah.
They basically called up and said, hey, we're doing a 10th anniversary event there at PAX, all about our fans. We want to really show them a good time. But as part of that, some of the things that they're doing, they wanted to capture. So, which I'm glad they did, because just as a fan of BioShock, I was like, oh, I would want to see this cosplay contest, or
sure,
I would want to see this, string quartet performing the BioShock medley, or, whatever. So, we basically got into it with them. We planned the shoot, got close with their event staff and marketing teams. IGN hosted or sponsored the event, and so they were there. They had their hosts there, kind of doing the cosplay contest. So it was fun. It was, I've talked to you before about, I'm always kind of two minds. I have the Mediajuice side of me, which is my company, which is how I make a living, which is game trailers, which is promotional videos, TV spots, etc. But then there's the side of me that's, the filmmaker, Jeremy Sneed, things that I'm pursuing. Obviously, Mediajuice is my production company, so it produces things from my film career. This was a lot of fun to take. Like I said before, when I think of conventions, it's usually like my filmmaking career of like, okay, I'm there to shoot as many interviews as I can, to get as much footage as I can for this documentary. Now, this being for a client, for 2K, it was fun to take my and all of my team's experience to the event, because we were also shooting fan interviews and covering the event and shooting it similar to how you would a documentary. If you were, documenting gaming, or you'd want to get the event, you'd want to get the staff, you'd want to get fan interviews. So we did that, and it was fun because we've worked that muscle so much. Me as a filmmaker and my team as a production company. It was fun to kind of let those skills shine at the event and for 2K, and then to bring the content back and produce it. So it was this weird kind of intersection of my filmmaking career and Mediajuice, my production company. But I mean, couldn't ask for a better client. I mean, 2K is it's funny, the old cliche you always say, well, they got there for a reason, and I think that's true. I think that it's like big companies that are successful. It's trickle down or trickle up, whatever you want to call it. You see that in the culture of why they're successful. I've seen it with Capcom. I've seen it with Marvel. I've seen it with 2K now. I've seen it with Gearbox. It really comes from leadership, which then creates culture, and then the culture of the company kind of fosters, excellence in their marketing and their production, which then when they outsource to an agency like us, you see that, you feel that, as opposed to, someone that doesn't know what they're doing or doesn't know what they want or isn't professional or doesn't respect your process as a creator. So it was cool. I enjoyed it, and I think we're going to be doing more stuff for 2Ks.
It's time for script notes, and today we're going to answer a couple comments and messages from Instagram. So you can get a hold of the podcast many, many different ways. One of them being you can email at mediajuicepodcast@gmail.com. You can do the Facebook thing by hitting up facebook.com/Mediajuice Studios or Twitter @MediajuiceTwit, or you can find Mediajuice on Instagram like @OMG Danny did. OMG Danny was asking how many of these are there, and that was in reference to the Jeremy Sneed Video Game Museum clip that was posted on Instagram. So how many of those are there?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, I know we talked about it before, but just to give people, I guess, an overall, it's what we're calling Jeremy Sneed's Video Game Museum is essentially all the outtakes of Video Games the Movie. There's hundreds of hours of interview footage that didn't make it into the interview. That's just sort of the documentary process, is you shoot way more than you use in a final, 90-minute documentary. But because of all these people that are industry veterans and icons and celebrities, we thought we need to share this instead of letting it die on hard drives. So we started that a couple of months ago, and we're going from literally from Magnavox and Atari all the way to Xbox One and PlayStation 4. And so we've been releasing for a couple of months now, and I want to say there's about, I'm not even going to guess. I know there's over 30, and it's every game console, handheld gaming system that has existed from Magnavox into now. So good question, and I should have researched more before I got on the podcast here, but go to our YouTube. There's a playlist on the Mediajuice Studios YouTube called Jeremy Sneed's Video Game Museum, and there's also just on the website there's a section there called Jeremy Sneed's Video Game Museum, and they're all there, so you can watch one or all of them. If you're a gamer, a historian, a documentary fan, then you'll like them. They're a lot of fun. They're all kind of these bite-sized 2 to 3 minute clips of everybody, people talking all about the Atari 2600 or about the PlayStation 1 or whatever the system is. So it's fun.
All right. We have one more question here also from Instagram, and at Collecting Box is commenting on one of the clips from, I believe it's from Unlocked. It's just, he said, loved this episode. How do you and David know so many people?
Oh, that's funny. Well, definitely that applies to David Eddings. He's as I said on the episode, he is very well connected. And I guess as I sort of zoom back on my career in Mediajuice, I guess I am too. I guess I never really look at it that way of I know this many people, or I can get access to these big companies. But which I guess is just a fancy way of saying I take it for granted, which I shouldn't. But, I think it's just a snowball. I think it's just being passionate about what you do and bringing your art or your gift or your creation to the market. And if it doesn't exist, working at it, putting your talents towards something that you're passionate about, and you're gonna run into people that are like-minded, and people that are, whether it's a big company or small company or a known person or a not known person, if they see your passion and they see that you're trying, Yes, there's going to be people that say no and slam the door in your face. But if you stick to it, you're going to run into those people that recognize that and say, hey, here's someone that's working hard, that's talented, or that's developing their talent, and they're going to become a connection. They're going to open a door for you, and they're going to remember you, and you're going to remember them, and you'll put them in your Rolodex. I actually, it's a cliche, but you've heard it before. It's like there's no such thing as luck. Luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. And
yeah, right.
I think that's true of contacts and connections too. You meeting people and not just meeting, but creating meaningful relationships that could then benefit your career or help you with a project you're working on. Those all come from being prepared, from working at your craft or being looking at what you're doing strategically and being committed to it. And then when you hit that intersection of meeting someone that could help you, then they recognize it in you, and you of course recognize it in them. It's happened with me time and time again. I mean, from when I met Zach Braff to when I met Sean Astin to any and all the folks in the game industry, Cliff Blazinski, David Perry. They have a lot of people that want something from them. And David Eddings is no different. I mean, there's people that he's met that a lot of people want things from, and they can, because of that, because they get VIPs, very important people, get a lot of traffic, get a lot of people that are asking them for things. So they have a lot of experience in basically BS, people that aren't going to follow through, or people that don't have the passion to do it. And so I think they can identify people that break that trend, that are going to follow through, that do have the passion, or that do have the talent, and that are sticky, they're going to stick, and they're going to stick it through. So, wow, that's a long answer to her question, but I guess I'll stop there because I've already said too much.
Yeah, no, I think you're right though. I think people do recognize passion, and it's not like people are inaccessible. It's just they recognize passion because they possess that same thing. That's how they got where they are. So I think there's, you'll always run into the occasional, I guess, jerk here and there that doesn't want to share in that passion and help someone else out. But for the most part, I think what you're saying is right on. People recognize that passion, and they want to help that grow, because that's what keeps industries alive, is fresh, young people, new people, whatever, new players on the scene that bring that passion and keep it fresh. So,
and I think part of that too, just to add, is you do have to develop somewhat of a thick skin, because like you said, you are going to run into jerks and people that won't help you and are only focused on themselves. But it's like being a salesman. You knock on so many doors. You are going to get interact with people that see the passion, and so it's developing a thick skin. You can't, especially if you're a creative, if you work in the creative space, because most creative people are sensitive, and right. As a cliche, I think that's true. I mean, do you agree?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that's something that you have to kind of develop as a creative, is like, okay, take your feelings off your shoulder and just trudge ahead.
Well, and I think the thing with creative people too is they are putting so much passion and so much of themselves into the things they create that it's easy for them to take it as a personal attack or a personal offense. If somebody goes, no, didn't like that, or no, I'm not going to help you. It's not that. For it is a business to an extent, so you have to kind of separate those two. All right, well, I think that's going to put a wrap on this show. Thank you so much.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks to everybody that tuned in to listen. Thanks to our guest, Louis Castle. Not Louis C.K., but Louis Castle.
But we're going to get him on sometime.
That would be great. I'd be all for it.
Make that happen, Jeremiah. Okay, make some calls.
I'm going to get my Rolodex out. And
be passionate about it, and don't take no for an answer, okay?
You know it.
No, it's fun. I like talking to Louis. This was good. This is having these conversations with friends and people that I've worked with, like I said, in front of the camera, behind the camera. in the midst of shooting commercials and doing Mediajuice stuff it's always fun. It always kind of helps me to kind of zoom out from my day or my week and like, okay, this is cool to deep dive on, someone's career or whatever. I think it's healthy.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Very good stuff. So yeah, again, big thanks to Lewis for joining us. And if you want to be a part of the script notes segment, like we said before, you can always email at mediajuicepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. But of course, you can find all of those links and all those ways to connect at mediajuicestudios.com.
.com, not .cub.
Maybe
that'll be a URL.
I was getting ready to say the hub of all things Mediajuice Studios, and it just kind of came out .cub. So anyway,
those hybrids.
I think that's going to put a wrap on this show. We will see you next time with more juicy media.
That's right.
From this one juicy podcast that we call the Mediajuice Podcast.
That's right. And to wrap up, Lewis Castle, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Battle for the Stones, Mediajuice.
Or as I like
Passion.
to say, the MVCIB FTS.
Yes. That should be the title of every podcast now. It's just the acronym of every single topic and title of every project I'm working on at Mediajuice.
We'll just slam them all together. See if people can figure it out.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.